I am here today because enough is enough. On behalf of the NAACP, our nation's oldest and largest grassroots-based civil rights organization, my name is Hilary Shelton, Director of the NAACP's Washington Bureau and Senior Vice President for Policy and Advocacy. Enough is enough. As we follow the issues of the death penalty, how they affect African Americans and many other Americans in our society, for 105 years, we recognize a number of very problematic and challenging circumstances. Number one, the option of African Americans being rushed to judgment and executed in many cases in which they were not even involved in the commission of a crime is much too high. When I look at the data that was provided to us by organizations like the Death Penalty Information Center, we recognize that of all those Americans that were sentenced to death and later found to be innocent, though African Americans make up 12.4% of the national population, we are 38% of those that are much more likely to be rushed to judgment and released after being found to be innocent, with an average time span of 15 years in prison before finding that data out. In addition, more outrageously horrific, those who were sentenced to death and later found to be innocent after being executed, African Americans are 35% according to that study. If you're looking for just a tangible example, watch on the news as you see those that are later found to be innocent and freed from prison because of DNA evidence, and you'll find that African Americans are the primary group of people that are freed later. Again, that rush to judgment. So as we look at joining this very, very important campaign, 90 million strong, I would say that is indeed a conservative estimate. In essence, as more Americans find out just how problematically the death penalty has been handled in our society, the cost of the death penalty actually exceeding life imprisonment without parole, the kind of a representation given to those that end up being sentenced to death because they're given to public offenders that very well have such a high caseload, they cannot give the proper attention to these kind of issues. We know we must work with coalitions like this to finally stop it. We're absolutely delighted that many states have seen the problem. We've seen states, even like New Mexico, that has moved to eliminate the death penalty because they found it to be counterintuitive. So we're delighted to join this as we move our national NAACP. Our 2,200 membership units throughout the United States are over 500,000 card-carrying members because we plan on standing side by side in the same row to move to make sure that the death penalty is addressed and is eliminated in our society, and we can bring some sense and sensibility to this problem. Just one last point I want to make. We've seen many problems in our criminal justice system. From the very front end, we've seen problems with racial profiling, which as we drive along the highway between Washington, D.C. and Wilmington, Delaware, though African Americans make up 17% of the population, we're over 70% of those that are stopped. And if you look at the hit rate, it's even more outrageous. If we look at as we move through the system and how often we're charged with crimes we did not commit, and then look at the back end of the system as we talk about issues of punishment and find the application of the death penalty being administered as it is, we find it's very similar to issues raised at the very beginning of the NAACP's founding. That is, when there's a rush to judgment, when there's an assumption of guilt by virtue of race, when someone is summarily killed by those within their community, we used to call that lynching. Now, unfortunately, we call that the utilization of the death penalty. Lynching by any other name is still lynching. It has to stop.